Join me today as we talk about the most recent Dragonlance novel, Dragons of Eternity, Part 3 of the Dragonlance Destinies series. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobby, and today we're going to be talking about Dragons of Eternity, which I picked up at GenCon 2024 and finally finished a couple days ago. I'm going to have a non-spoiler part here, and then we'll talk spoilers later. So overall, I definitely enjoyed the book. I think Weiss and Hickman seem to be still on top of their game as far as writing. I have seen complaints to the contrary. I didn't really feel that with the book, but I'm not a professional literary critic, so maybe they're saying something I'm just not. There were a number of funny moments, and most of those had to do with the tried and true pattern of someone saying something to Tasselhoff and him not understanding what it means. This isn't an example from the book, but it's the closest I can come up with off the top of my head. Someone would say something and be discombobulated, and he would be like, discombobulated? Like, what's it mean to be combobulated? And, just kind of go off on a wild tangent in his head or out loud. And obviously, far better examples in the book. That's not one from the book. That's just me off the top of my head. I really should write some of these down sometime when I'm reading these books. And however, I will note there were a couple jokes that I thought, while they were funny for the most part, I don't like fantasy worlds that have no connection at all to the real world making jokes in reference to things in the real world. And the one I do remember, and this involves Fizbin, who's really Paladine, their world's version of Bahamut. And I'm probably gonna get the particulars screwed up, but you'll get the punchline of the point of what I'm trying to make here. There's a point where he says something along the lines of things are about to get dicey, and then he's like, "Get it? Dicey? It's a gamer joke." And I was just kind of like, "Ugh, that's rough. That is rough." I do not like things referencing the real world that have no connection to the real world. And there was a couple other things in there, mainly involving the character whose name I don't remember, who they had in the last book, make a new device of time journeying. So those jokes were rough, but hey, I mean, you can't knock it out of the park all the time. I'm not like, oh man, Weiss and Hickman have lost it after that. No, they're better authors than I'll ever be. So, yeah, I mean, the series does conclude. This is the third book in the trilogy, and things do get wrapped up, and I'll talk about some of that in the spoiler section here in a minute. The conclusion, and I'll explain why in this spoiler section, is a little unsatisfying. I mean, it is a conclusion, and it seems like there's a potential tremendous retcon in the conclusion. So we'll have to see where they go, because they've already announced another series of books. So if that was their intention, to retcon what it appears they did, then I expect the next set... Well, no, the next set's going to be about Huma. So that's set in the past. But, yeah, my comments will make more sense if you stick around for the spoiler section. So overall, I enjoyed the book. Read through it pretty quickly. And... yeah, don't regret getting it or anything. Definitely, I enjoyed the book. And aside from a few issues with some things at the end, I thought it was a good book. The other two might be a little bit better because they don't have the minor downfalls at the end of this one. But overall, I think it's probably worth reading. Although I have seen a few folks online really rake it over the coals. And I don't quite get it, but I haven't read a ton of the other Dragonlance books. and it seems like it has to do with Weiss and Hickman from the perspective of the people writing these comments. Seems like they don't really care about what other people have written for Dragonlance. Which, if I were the creator of the setting, I'd probably take the George Lucas approach too, of like, well, it's all great, but I'm the creator, so I'm going to do whatever. But no, it's unfortunate if that's the case because it is a shared setting, But I don't know. Like I said, I've not really read many of the. I don't think I've read any of the other Dragonlance books that they didn't write. So anyway, that's about as far as I can go without going to spoilers. Oh, I guess I will say the pacing. I will say one comment about the pacing. The beginning did feel really slow. It felt like things were just kind of very slowly happening just to grind out pages. But then once the action kicks in, the rest of the book went very quickly. So it might have just been me coming off a funk from something else. But I truly think that the beginning of the book, I was starting to kind of feel like, are we really doing this? So maybe it's just me. So anyway, if you're going to skip the spoilers, then please let me go ahead and pimp my channel here for a moment. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Comment down below. Comments and shares are probably the most effective way you can help us grow the channel if you are so inclined. Have you read the other two books? If you did you like them? Do you plan on reading this third one? What's your favorite Dragonlance book? Are you looking forward to the next set of books about Huma? And so on and so on. Just, let me know down in the comments some Dragonlance stuff you know about. But anyway, on to the spoiler section. So, okay, I'll start with the beginning. The beginning feels slow because it's essentially everyone dancing around the fact that they need to get into the end of the last tome, size up the situation, probably get Riverwind and Goldmoon and the Crystal Staff without having to fight Kitiara. And in that timeline, they're now in what they call chaos time because they lost the war back in the past in the end of the last book. So Takhisis rules the world. And like when they look up in the sky, hers is the only constellation that's up there. So the other gods have been beaten back. And then you have, in the main timeline, things haven't caught up to the present yet, which is still before Dragons of Summer Flame. That's going to be real important here towards the end of this. And they decide to rope in Tanis and send him over to the other timeline because Brother Cairn uses the device of time journey to take himself and Tanis back over there. And then the plan is he and Destina are going to go back to where they were in the last book to try to stop the events of happening. So they're going to try to stop Huma and Gwyneth from being killed so that they can mortally wound Takhisis. And so that's the big plan. Meanwhile, the others are going to try to cause a distraction because since they're fighting a god, and gods can exist in more than one moment in time, Takhisis is looking up and down the timeline trying to find the Grey Gem because she knows that she's only won because of the Grey Gem's influence. So she needs to get it before someone else changes things back or just to some other configuration where she's not the ruler. So the plan is to stir up trouble during what would have been the events of Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Only now, Takhisis rules things, so things are going to kind of happen differently, but not quite different. So, yeah. So they're the first 70, 80 pages maybe is them there in Solace and the end of the last home and all that. It just really feels like it kind of grinds on. Yeah. So Kitiara figures out that Raistlin and probably Caramon are definitely against her. That Tanis is there and has no interest in being her lieutenant. And, this is older Tanis, so he's like, I don't even know what I ever saw in this woman. She's clearly a psychopath. So yeah. Then they have to come up with a plan, which is essentially to go to the High Claris's Tower, or what's left of it, to loot it, because that's where the Dragonlances and a Dragon Orb are. And so their plan B is if Brother Cairn and Destina cannot fix things in the past, then they're going to have to defeat Takesis in the present and just try to make that world better and get used to the fact they're going to be stuck there. So some upsides. Raistlin and Tanis do kind of have it out, because Raistlin's like, "Don't you trust me?" And Tanis is like, "No, I don't. Like, the last time you had a dragon orb, you just poof left us to die." And he's just kind of like, "Yeah, well, I've learned a few lessons since then." And it's amazing what dying will do to you. So, because remember, this is Raistlin from after his death. So, and same with Sturm. They Tasselhoff uses the crystal staff to heal Flint, his heart, because in the original trilogy he dies of a heart attack in the third book. So, which leads, once he's healed, Tanis is just, I think he says something like, "What happened?" And Raistlin's like, "I think Tasselhoff Burfoot is the smartest person in this room because it was such an obvious solution, if they're going to be stuck there." And that kind of leads into the problem of there's all kinds of buildup to in case they're stuck there, and then we never get the battle, we never get any of the payoff. And the big part of the payoff was Raistlin concedes that he should apologize to Caramon for all the evil and awful things he did to him, because no matter what happened, his brother still loved him. And I think Tanis even tells him, it's Tanis or Tasselhoff, I don't remember who, even tells him that even now, this is years after their present was years after the Legends trilogy. That's where, that's the time period that Tanis and Tasselhoff come from. And so this is after Raistlin and Sturm are both dead and Flint are dead. So one of the two of them tells him that Caramon still speaks highly of Raistlin. That he still talks about him. And Tika's like, "Oh, that no good brother of yours, got what was coming to him, blah, blah, blah." And, Raistlin concedes that, he probably should apologize to him. That, that he did do awful things to him. And that was the kind of thing I was hoping for. That acknowledgement, especially from Raistlin, now that he's dead and he's seen the results of his labors, and has had time to think on them in the afterlife, to come around and be like, "Yeah, I was kind of a jackass to my own twin brother who only ever stood up for me." But we never get that. Like, that moment never happens. Now, yes, the characters involved would have forgotten, and it would have been apologizing to an alternate reality version, but, it would have been nice. Or if he would have said something to Tasselhoff or Tanis on the off chance that they remembered once time was corrected. We don't get any kind of payoff with the Dragonlances. We do get a fight with Sargonis and Kiri Jolith. I know I'm mispronouncing that. Against Takesis. But there's definitely like a, "Oh, you've been a worthy opponent, like let's stand side by side and show Takesis what's what" kind of moment. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, but Destina and Cairn fix things in the past. So then they leave and they kind of fade out of history, except Destina saved Huma from the assassin this time. So she is mentioned in the account of the battle, not by name because they didn't know her name. But because of that, there are lady knights of the Knights of Solamnia. I know I'm mispronouncing that too, because I don't think there were in the main timeline. I think that's a change. I could be wrong, but I think that is a change. And they wear the emblem that they concocted for her to represent her, because showing that a woman could help in battle, because it's medieval kingdom. So but she remembers everything that happened, and so does Cairn, but she doesn't know that Tasselhoff remembers. And of course Astenus remembers because, he's the god. Or I think he remembers. I don't know, from Legends he probably shouldn't remember. But anyway, so at the end, Tasselhoff goes and confronts Astinus, and he's like, "How do I know that these memories are, real? Like I tell people about them, and no one knows what I'm talking about." He's like, "Did this really happen?" But someone placed a spell on him so he couldn't say the name of the gray gem. And he tries to say it again, and the same thing happens. And Astinus is like, "Well, there's your answer." And it takes Tasselhoff a minute, and he puts it together. He's like, "Oh, well, that's right. That spell occurred in the other reality. And if it's still affecting me, so clearly that had to be real." And, Astinus smiles because Tasselhoff gets it. And, so he goes because he's going to go to Destina's wedding with Brother Cairn. All the business with her family's castle gets resolved. Her cousin ends up running up a bunch of debts and sells the castle. And it turns out that one of the dragons that she knows, Sky, I believe, had his treasure hoard appraised on a bet from some other dragon. And it's funny because he's like, "Yeah, I know most of it's crap, but, it's interesting." Then they found a ring in there from the time of the king priest that was worth some astronomical amount of money. So the dragon sold that and used the money to buy the castle, and then he gives it to Destina. He's like, "Oh, no, it's your castle. Like, what the hell would I want to do with it? Like, the rooms are too tiny, and all that, this, that, and the other." He's like, "I'm perfectly like." Remember the comment about windows? Like, plus there's too many windows. Like, you folks like to look out windows, but it never occurred to you other people can look in. So, just like that was some revelation that the dragon figured that the mortals hadn't figured out. That was kind of funny. And she's like, "No, just surround me with stone like in this cave right here. Right here, we're good." And so Destina draws up a deed for the cave and gives it to Sky. And it's like, "Oh, a deed of my own. All right." It's like a kid in a candy shop. So, yeah, like I said, it's just there's a few things that are clearly building to that there's no payoff to, and I really wish that final closure with Raistlin, him apologizing to Caramon. Again, I think it would have had to have told Tasselhoff, and Tasselhoff would tell him. And of course, Caramon might not believe him or anything, but, he would at least try. So, now, as for the major retcon that probably happens, at the end of the book, they seal the gray gem away in a mirror-lined box that cannot be opened, that they then check into what sounds a hell of a lot like a black hole. So if that is the case, and if that's not undone, then Dragons of Summer Flame and a lot of the subsequent stories won't ever happen. Which means that there's a real good chance that they just retconned everything from just before Dragons of Summer Flame onward, so that it never happened. Which means they're free to just take off however they want to again, which wouldn't surprise me because I'm given to understand they were not big fans of that plot direction. So, we'll see. Although the next set of books is about Huma, so we won't see you then. Presumably not, unless there's time travel in that book too. But anyway, overall, I liked the book. Thought it was pretty good. The other two might have been ever so slightly better just because there's not that build up to the payoff that just never happens. But other than that, definitely consider it worth a read if you're a Dragonlance fan. Yeah, that's really all I got to say about it. If it's worthwhile, I might do a review of like an overview of the whole trilogy. I don't know if I'll do that because each of the reviews I kind of talk about them. So, but you never know. See, maybe I get bored. But yeah, so I picked this up at GenCon. It's signed. Actually, a few days ago, I was trying to find my copy of the first book, and I couldn't, and I finally did, and I realized it's not signed. So now I've got to look at around GenCon next year and try to catch Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman at their booth to sign it, and maybe some of my other books that I've had Margaret Weiss sign, but not Tracy Hickman, but they're very heavy because they're hardbacks, and I don't like carrying them around all day. So we'll see on that. Probably talk about that in the Gen Con video next year. Anyway, there will probably be an Amazon affiliate link down at the bottom if you want to buy the book. So, and you want to, help out the channel there. That's up to you. But otherwise, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff I talked about halfway through the video. Well, about a third of the way through the video by the timer there. Comments and likes are probably the best way to help the channel spread, if you're so inclined. But otherwise, that's about all I've got to say. And there's not any kind of real, witty Dragonlance one-liner I can throw out here. So we'll see you folks later.